Hello everyone, my name is Dorota Filipowicz and I'm a member of ICE Newsletter Editorial Board. Welcome to the next chapter of our amazing scientist interview. Today I have a great honor and privilege to visit Professor Cynthia Andoniadou in her lab. Cynthia is a principal investigator at the Center for Craniofacial and Regenerative Biology, the Associate Dean for Doctoral Studies at King's College London, and a member of Executive Committee of the European Society of Endocrinology. Her research focused on the endocrine stem cells, for which she received a lot of prizes, a lot of recognition. So I'm very glad to welcome you, Cynthia, in our interview. To begin, could you please briefly explain what you are currently working on in your lab?
Thank you very much, Dorota. And may I say that it's a pleasure to have you here during your research observership in our lab. So I'm working, as you know, on endocrine stem cells, and specifically we work with the pituitary gland. We also work with the adrenal medulla. We're open to working with other endocrine organs as well. And what we're doing is trying to understand the relationships between stem cells and other cells, in particular, how the communication's taking place and what governs what stem cells do. So what do they decide to do? They can differentiate, they can divide, self-renew, they can give rise to new progeny. But who controls those actions? So we're looking at those relationships and what the mechanisms of control are, because they have implications in endocrine disease.
Yeah, and this is exactly what interested me a lot. That's why I chose your place to have my ROP here. Okay, so Cynthia, you are a basic researcher. So you had a wide spectrum of possibility where to go, what path to choose. Why it was endocrinology?
Do you want the honest answer?
Of course, only that.
By accident. So like many things in science, we go down roads that we don't expect. When I trained in stem cells and developmental biology. During my PhD, I was working on neural stem cells, and I was particularly interested in neural stem cells and progenitors during embryology. So how does the brain form? So I started working on the brain, and in my postdoc, I started working on forebrain developments, the front of the brain that's going to give rise to telencephalon and eye structures as well. And I was looking at genes that regulate that patterning. And what I found was that many of those genes, as many people already knew, are also expressed in the pituitary gland, but it also meant that my tools that I was using, such as mouse tools, when I was looking at expression of something in the brain using a mouse tool, I also expressed it in the pituitary gland. So I started getting phenotypes in the pituitary gland. So I started looking at the pituitary gland, and for me it was entirely new, and I found it fascinating. So that's why I stayed in endocrinology.
Thank you. It's like amazing to hear that there's not everything planned from the early first steps. But yeah, it ended up like very successful.
Sure.
So you already told us how your journey began, but what was like the key moment in your career, like the breakthrough?
The breakthrough, okay. Right, so that has to be, so you might or might not know that we published a model previously on non-cell autonomous or cell non-autonomous tumor formation, which means that the cells that sustain the mutation are not the cells that divide to give bulk to the tumor. They're the cells that tell other cells to divide and give the tumor mass, give rise to tumor mass. So this is what we call paracrine signaling, and it's a main feature of the research that we're still doing at the moment. So the key moment, I think, for me was when I was lineage tracing the cells with the mutation. So I was following the fate of the mutated cells and their descendants using a genetic tool. So every cell that came from a mutated cell was going to be green. And I looked down the microscope at this first tumor that I was analyzing with this genetic tool on, and the tumor was not green. And I thought, I've done something wrong with the genetics. Maybe, you know, the green marker is not there. But actually, I started looking more carefully in higher power, and I saw, you know, pituitary crushed around the tumor that was green. So I knew that I hadn't made a mistake with the genetics, and I thought, this is absolutely shocking. And if it means what I think it means, that's a big thing.
Wow.
So I ran and got my supervisor, and then we just said, okay, we need to confirm this many times before we even tell anyone else. So that to me is a defining moment, because it was very late at night on a Friday, microscope, and it was the end of the week where I thought nothing had worked. So
Wow.
that was an excellent moment.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
What do you consider this particular finding, as your biggest achievement in the whole career?
Oof, no, I wouldn't say so. I think my biggest achievement in the whole career is not scientific.
Oh.
I think it's training.
Oh,
So I wouldn't say that would be my achievement. If I look back and thought I've had a really good career when I'm retiring, I would think about the people that have developed into independent scientists, and how watching them and knowing that I contributed to that is my greatest achievement.
well, thank you for saying that, because as I'm here in your lab, I know that you are a great, outstanding mentor for your students. So it's like a great thing.
If they're listening on the other side of the lab, it's now the
They
time
are
for them to say, no, that's not true.
They
They
can
have the
only
chance,
confirm. Okay, so it was the best moment probably, but how about obstacles? What was the most challenging thing for you? The biggest problem during your whole career? Can be meritorical, can be something else.
So perhaps I think, because I think I've got long left in my career, I think possibly the biggest challenges are not here yet. I can say I've had it in a way relatively easy, in that I was very lucky to have jobs, with continuing fashion. I was, able to go from one very good institute to another very good institute. So in that respect, it's been very easy for me, and I had choices. Now, when it came for me to apply to become independent, that's when things started to get very difficult. So putting in fellowship applications and getting rejections, sending papers out that I had, more, maybe higher hopes, not expectations, but hopes, and then them being toned down a little bit, jumping from journal to journal. That process, combined with the very hard work that needed to go in to get to that stage, was quite demoralizing. And I think that is something where I could have quit. I could have decided not to continue. So it wasn't one obstacle as such. It was, the way the system is, there are only so many positions and they're very hard to get. So you have to be really, really lucky, in addition to working hard. Working hard is essential, but it's not enough. You need luck. So I'm very lucky to have got the positions that I have, and becoming independent. But getting over the rejections, which is, when you haven't faced that before, it feels horrible, and it still feels horrible. but learning how to cope with that and deal with it and say, okay, this is not personal, it's about the science, I need to do better in the science, I think that kept me going.
What do you do to cope with that? So I've heard from your students that sometimes you are coming to the lab and walking with them. Is it one of the way how you cope with this?
No, I wish I was here all the time. No, how I cope with rejection is a pizza. I really like pizza, and I think if I have a bad day, having a wine and a pizza is the best way to cope with it. But I think you need a little bit of time to wallow, cry on your own a little bit, just make sure that you give yourself the time to process what's happened, and then not take it personally. So when you initially get reviews, comments, you think, oh, these people are so horrible, they hate me, this is so unfair, I explained this so well. And then you when you calm down and you look back at your grant or your paper, you think, actually, I haven't explained it well enough, and this is what I need to be changing. So you need to then look at it with brand new set of eyes and improve.
Okay, thank you for that tips. And thinking about the young generation, your students' eyes, what do you think is the biggest challenge for them today?
So things are very tough, I think, nowadays. They're a lot tougher than when I was a postdoc. I think there are even fewer positions, the funding is more competitive, but equally there are many alternative careers that are better known to everybody rather than just academia and the university. There is a lot of industry, and a lot of industry also supporting basic science, translational science. It doesn't all have to be clinical research. And there are also many opportunities as editors in policy, etc., in science communication. So, like you're doing, you could use this for a career down the line if you choose to go down that route rather than not be a clinical academic. But this, I think that this is a good thing, but it doesn't make it any easier in terms of people getting where they need to get. So I think the biggest challenge at the moment is also the funding. So a lot of technology, in order to get the big data, to do the big studies, needs a lot of money. So maybe we can get data a lot faster than before, but it is very expensive. So you need to be able to have someone investing in you and saying, okay, I trust that you're going to do a good job. So that's very difficult to come by. So people are often lucky and they have that, but often they are not lucky because they're not in the right environment to support this, maybe in countries where they don't have that much money, and then they have to do a lot more in order to get the same level of publications and the same opportunities.
So what would you actually advise to these young people?
To persevere. So to put things into context, to remind people where you're coming from. So if you're coming from a big research institute that doesn't need to apply for funding and is co-funded, then people should know that. And if you're coming from a small university in a provincial town and you have very little in terms of the resources, you're doing a magnificent job compared to what you have. Right. So I think it's important to also remind
honest,
people,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. To be forthcoming. It's not it's not an excuse, but it's a reason. You need to be explaining what your background is, and then people need to place it into the context when they're assessing you.
Yeah, so everyone starts from different positions.
Exactly.
We have to be open with that. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you are very active in European Society of Endocrinology. What would you advise for us, as the organization, in which way we should go to be successful, to have an impact?
You mean in which way you should be going in the society or in the community?
In the community.
Well, I think engaging more with the public is important in any sector. The more information there is, and accurate information rather than misinformation. And the majority of you and I are clinically trained. You're in a position where you also have been trained how to talk to the public, explain things simply. So you have this brilliant advantage in reaching everybody and reaching broadly. Now, eyes are an amazing group of people that I don't know how many members you've got at the moment, but your spread is throughout Europe and beyond, right? Yeah. Because you've got a lot of members that want to come in from beyond. So you have a lot of power. So if there's policy that you want to be changing, if there's something you need to advocate for in your careers, I think that you are the guys to do this. You shouldn't wait for someone else to change it. You are the ones that should be active right now in voicing whatever it is that you would like to change.
So the time for us is now, right?
Now.
No, when we get older.
No, the older you get, the more responsibilities you have.
Cynthia, you inspire the younger generation. Who was the true inspiration for you?
Oh, this is a very, very tough one. So I don't think I've thought about this actually in the context of from when I was at school going forward into my early undergraduate studies and the PhD. There was never one person that inspired me, and because I got into endocrinology in a little bit of a strange way, right? Because that wasn't my plan. I didn't have endocrinologists as my inspiration. But what did inspire me is the lack of women in positions that were prominent, and the lack of promotion of women that had achieved great things. And I felt that was a little bit unfair. So I didn't see, when you look at, the Royal Society composition, for example, when I was starting out, I didn't see a lot of women, as many women as the men. Or when, you're looking at Nobel Prize winners, you don't see as many women as the men. And those things, even in my day-to-day encounters with big professors, in talks, seminars, I always saw that the women were few, they were extraordinary, and each and every one of them had something incredible to offer. And I really felt at the time that we need to change that. And I mean, people are, right, and everyone's thinking the same, and all over the world throughout my career, all the women are thinking the same. But that was a driving force for me. It was more like, I can get there, I can do this. Not necessarily, be as big as them, but I can do better. And I need to do it for myself and for other women.
Yeah, and you do a lot for them, being very active in Elwin as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So European Women in Endocrinology.
Exactly. So one last question. Looking retrospectively, if you could change one thing in your career, make it different, what would that be?
Oof. So what? Okay, is this like a magic genie?
Yeah,
that will
it is.
Grant me wishes.
It is right now.
I think, what would I do differently? I wouldn't change anything in my training, I can tell you that. But what I would do is I'd give more money, more funding to whichever lab I was in and all around me. Because if that big problem is taken away from us, we could do incredible things, and I think it would, accelerate everybody's career. So being at an early career stage and having a lot of funds, but knowing how to use them, I think propels you to the next level. And that's what I would, want for all of my trainees, is to have the opportunity not to worry about the funds and do the science, like the best science that they can.
Without borders.
Without bothers, but also without waste, right? So ensuring that everything is carefully planned out. Yeah, that's one thing I would change.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to put a dot. So thank you so much, Cynthia, for your time. It was amazing to hear about your career, about your research, about your dedication for teaching. Thank you for the opportunity to have me here.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's amazing time for me, and I wish everyone to spend such a good educational month in your institute.
Yeah, more people should apply for the research observerships.
Exactly. So thank you all for watching. Keep watching us and explore amazing scientists with eyes. Thank you.